Hi, and welcome to the AnyRPG Unity Scriptable Objects Overview livestream. In this video, I will be briefly introducing the AnyRPG Engine and then giving a demonstration of how the configuration of scriptable objects and some game object components are driving the dynamic content and interactions that you see on screen. I will be doing this by playing through Alpha Chapter 1, A Lost Soul in the Unity editor and occasionally pausing the game to look at the objects driving the content. I won't be going into the actual C# code in this video, but if you would like to see that type of content in the future, be sure to like the videos, subscribe to the Cohesion YouTube channel, or just leave a message in the comments telling me what type of content you would like to see in upcoming episodes. AnyRPG is a 100% free and open source role-playing game engine designed in Unity and written in C#. The main website is at anyrpg.org, where you can find documentation on the engine. And we'll be covering some of this documentation today. You can also find links to executable versions of the game in the download section, as well as links to the full source code for the project on GitHub. The goal of the AnyRPG project is to allow storytellers to tell their stories in the format of a role-playing game quickly and easily, and it accomplishes this by providing a platform with the most common game functionality out of the box. Content creators only need to provide their visual assets and story content to create unique and compelling short stories, scenarios, adventures, and even full games. The entire engine was developed for free, and all visual assets included in the engine are free, as well as all visual assets that you see in AnyRPG Alpha are also free. Now that you know a little bit about the engine, let's just jump straight into a demonstration. So we will start here in the Unity editor, and we've got a single scene load game manager with one prefab in it, the game manager, which is pretty much going to manage everything that we'll be seeing here from now on. Okay, I am not getting any desktop audio, and we should be getting desktop audio for this right now. Oh, right, I might have turned the sound all the way down. Yeah, that's the issue. Okay, great. So, let's put that back onto our headset here. There, and okay, good. I'm seeing a little bit of desktop audio on the stream here. Sorry, don't mind me. This is actually my, I think, third time using the streaming software, and I noticed in my last couple of recordings that the sound was a little bit too loud. So I hope this is okay, and we'll just generally play through this entire demo with the sound off for now, just so that we don't have the audio being too loud here. So we'll go into the game here, and we're going to hit play, and actually let's just turn that sound right off there. Master volume off. Okay, great. Back into the gameplay, and we'll be loading up a new game here. So the first thing that we see here is a cutscene happening as we load into the game, and we've got some description here, place outside of space and time, and then we're into the game and playing and looking at our character. And that cutscene was actually shown as a result of a scene node scriptable object. So right now we're looking at the Soul Forge. And you can see this scriptable object is configured with the scene name, or sorry, the resource name. This description here is a description that was showing up on that cutscene there. This is the default spawn position where your character is going to spawn whenever he loads into this level if you're not sending any other spawn information in. And this music clip is the music that's going to be playing in the background, and the ambient sound is also another option. I've got the levels configured so that each level is taking advantage of one combination of this. So in this case, the Soul Forge has music but no ambient sound. We are going to be suppressing the character spawn here basically, and what that means is that the character will not actually spawn into the level until the cutscene is complete, and we're also suppressing the main camera when we come in so that this cutscene can play. If we had is cutscene, what it would do is when the cutscene was complete, it would actually load out and go into the scene that you loaded from originally, but since this is a regular level, that's not checked. And internally, this will become checked after we've seen this cutscene once, and then we won't need to view that cutscene anymore anytime we load into that level. So let's just go back into the game here, and we'll turn up the sound just for a second so that you can hear the background music here. But you see, if we turn down the music volume and turn up the ambient volume, then there's nothing happening because there's no ambient sound configured for this level. I'm just going to turn up the effects a little bit here so that you can hear. I don't know if you can hear that or not. There's some clicking happening when we're mousing over these controls right now as well. So let's go back into the game here, and we're going to continue until we get to our next piece of scriptable content. This ability here is controlled by scriptable objects, but we'll focus more on the ability system later. So next up, what we see is these unborn souls coming down the stairs here, and we're gonna just go up the stairs and check out what's happening and see where they're coming from here. So basically what we're looking at here is an invisible spawn node, and this spawn node is gonna spawn these units right here, and it has a unit cap and such. Let's just watch them and see where they're going here, and then after that we'll jump in and look at the components that are driving the behavior of these guys here. So if we follow them down, we can see they're going over to other teleporters, and then they're just sort of disappearing. So we watch this guy on the right here. He's just going to go over there, he's going to get to his spot, and he's gone. Now let's take a look at the scriptable objects and components that are actually driving that behavior. So if we look at this AI soul spawner here, this isn't a scriptable object, it's a game object component, but basically we can put these anywhere we want in a level, and we can just choose anything that we want to spawn with them. And we'll look at the rest of these options later here pretty much. In this case, the AI soul spawner is just going to be spawning units at level 1 once every 20 seconds. When a unit despawns, -1 means it's not going to do anything. You can make them respawn on despawn if you want to, but because we want this nice effect of them coming down the stairs like in a sequence with the same timing, we'll just have them spawning 20 seconds apart. Max units 50 means it'll keep on spawning units every 20 seconds until there's 50 of them, and after there's 50 of them it won't spawn anymore, because essentially we need like a good limit on our number of units so that we're not just going to be filling up the level if anything goes wrong. And point based basically just means it's going to spawn that unit at the pivot point of whatever this prefab is at in the world right now. So when we look at the actual soul that it's spawning here, the soul has a component on it that's going to be controlling this patrol here. So it has a possible list of 7 destinations. I'm actually going to turn this into a scriptable object later. It's just a component right now for testing purposes. And what I've done is I've just taken the positions of a bunch of those teleporters inside of the level and stuck them in here. So basically it'll choose based on this random flag right here, one of these random destinations. It will then use the Unity nav mesh agent to go ahead and get itself over to that destination, and because of this despawn on completion checkbox, then as soon as it reaches it, then it'll just despawn itself. So that's how we're accomplishing the effect in here of having these little souls traveling from one spot to another and then just disappearing. Next up, we see this Guardian of Souls, and he has a tag underneath his name. That tag is his faction, and he's also got a quest available to me. So let's just go take a look at him and see how that behavior is being driven. We can look at his AI character here, and we can see that he's got his character name right here and a faction name right here, Children of the Forge. And we'll go look at the scriptable object for that in a minute. He's also got this other object on him, a quest giver, and he's got a bunch of quests on him, you can see, but if we were to talk to him right now, we wouldn't even see any quests. We'd basically just get this dialogue. So let's also take a look at what's happening there to cause that dialogue to pop up. So he's starting and ending a quest called A Lost Soul, and that's the one that the dialogue we're looking at right now is for. So A Lost Soul is a scriptable object. It's a quest, and it has a check marks beside it, has opening dialogue, and what that means is that if a dialogue exists in the system called a lost soul, it's automatically going to pop that dialogue and require you to actually go in and complete that dialogue before you get the chance to accept this quest here. Like pretty much every quest in the game, I've just got dynamic level checked, and what that does is it just makes the quest level constantly whatever your character level is. So in this way, we're controlling the quests and making sure that we're never going to get so high level that they're not giving us any experience. This quest has 0 prerequisite conditions, which means that it's available at any time and there's nothing that you need to do. It's just, always be available, assuming that you are like at least level 1. Basically, the experience level here controls when that quest is going to become available for you. And it has one objective, a use interactable objective, and the interactable objective, we just have the type here, it's called change my name, and you have to complete a name change in order for that to work. So let's go take a look at those supporting objects for this. So A Lost Soul, here's the dialogue, and this dialogue basically has 7 nodes. Now the dialogue system right now is just really, really simple. It's completely linear. You get some text from the guy, and then you get a button you can click that's got some more text on it. So after we go through this dialogue, and this dialogue is marked complete, we'll be able to actually go in and pick up that quest. So let's go in and do that now. We can just go through, click on all this stuff, and then we get the quest right here, and we can accept it. And let's let's try to move our character out of the way here. Nope. Okay. There we go. That's better. Okay, so you can now see that we've got a little mini-map icon that just showed up here. This little dialogue icon window here, and this little thing right here. So those are showing up. If we go into the game manager, which is set to don't destroy and load, we can see the name change interactable panel. Let's pull that out a bit here, image, and the name change nameplate image. So this is an interactable object on this guy that allows us to change our name, and it's just linked to this icon right here. So that's how we're controlling what icons are showing up there. All interactables of the whatever interactable types, you can see this list here. There's quite a few of them: name change, cutscene, lootable character, faction change, all sorts of stuff. They all can have independent icons that show up both above their heads and on the mini map here. So we still have change my name set to 0 out of 1, and that's because we haven't actually completed this particular interaction. When we hit this confirm button, we're going to trigger a completion notice, and that will actually count the quest as complete. We don't even really have to change our name technically. We can just leave it as Lost Soul. All we have to do is just hit the complete button, and now we can see that that quest is complete. And now we can turn it in at this guy. And if you remember when we looked at those quests originally, and let's just go back in here to the quests. Oh, whoops, no, we actually want to look at the Guardian of Souls unit because that information is actually on him here. There we go. As a quest giver, he has this end quest box checked, and that means that he's also going to get the question mark over his head. You can see in this case that he doesn't start this particular quest, he only ends it, and in the case of this other quest, he starts it, but he doesn't end it, which means we're going to be going and turning it in with some other unit then. Here's the name change interactable script, and that was what made that little name change window pop up. And that is controlled by some prerequisites here. And basically, prerequisite conditions control when any particular interaction is available on an object. So this prerequisite condition, we've only got one of them, and the only real prerequisite we have in here, I'm just going to expand these out because we'll be looking at these later and we'll need to see them in some other examples. His only prerequisite is that we have this quest, A Lost Soul. Because we haven't checked complete or turned in, basically this means that the quest, A Lost Soul, has to be in our log. So long as the Lost Soul quest is in our log, then he'll be able to change our name for us. And that's how we're sort of accomplishing this appearance, basically, that we had this really smooth sort of dialogue flow where he just decided to tell us to change our name. And that was just all handled on the prerequisite conditions of where we were in our quest stage here. So we're going to complete that, and then we have some more dialogue before the next quest. And you can see now that if I look there over his head, there's no more dialogue indicator, and if I look at him on the mini-map, the only other indicator that we see is just his green character unit thing here. Let's take a look just for a minute at his faction here, which is the Children of the Forge. So this Children of the Forge faction is his faction. It's got an icon by default and a description to it, and a default disposition, basically. And so that's why he's green to us, is because his default disposition, basically you can consider this like reputation pretty much. You can gain reputation and it changes your disposition. And in this case, you only need a reputation level of 1 to be friendly with all the units in the game right now, because I haven't implemented like anything other than hard-coded reputations. So 0 is neutral, you'll get a yellow color. 1 is friendly, you'll get a green color, and -1 is unfriendly, red, and -0.5 is also unfriendly, orange, but not hostile. And they also have a disposition dictionary. So a default disposition means anybody that they have met that they have never heard of their faction before, basically, or that hasn't specially gained faction with them, is going to be friendly with them. They can also have the option to have specific dispositions toward other factions. So they could hate like just one faction but be friendly with everyone else. Moving along, we are going to go up to the Fountain of Time here. And you can see something else here now that we didn't see before, and that is the fact that this guy right here is glowing when we mouse over him. soul units right here are actually like it's like a spell effect, not really a material, so we can't change it. But when we mouse over this guy here, he's actually got materials, and what we're doing is we're just changing those materials when we hover over. He's interactable, and I think we can actually see that in the game manager here. Yeah, there we go, perfect. So we've got this this temporary material here called this glow material, and so you could set this basically to anything that you want, and it'll swap out all of his renderers and mesh renderers, skin mesh renderers, etc. with that material, and then change it to a color based on your faction with him. Now the Fountain of Time, if we click on it, you can kind of see maybe a little better there. His nameplate is yellow here, and that's because he doesn't really have any faction, so we're just sort of automatically neutral with each other, hence the yellow color when we mouse over him. Nothing really special going on with here that I haven't already demonstrated here. The quests, if you can see, like when I handed in this one quest, the other quest automatically become available. That was because of some prerequisites. So let's just take a look at that for a second. Our quest was called A Second Chance. There we go. So if we look at this particular quest, we can see that the prerequisite quest or prerequisite condition for this particular quest becoming available was that the Lost in Time quest was both checked as complete, which means it's in your log, it's completed, but you haven't turned it in, and turned in, which means obviously you've turned it in. So now we can go back down here and we see this guy's got another quest, and that's where we see that whole list of quests that he had. Basically, any of them will just be checking. Every time you turn in a quest, it's going to fire an event into like a centralized system event manager, which is going to inform anything that's listening. Those prerequisites have changed. So we'll just keep on going through, accept the next quest here, and then we'll go up and we'll see a new type of interactable. I really like this interactable because I'm not a fan of games that make you pay a whole pile of money in order to change your character's appearance. So in this engine, changing your character's appearance is something you can totally do in-game basically at any time. So we've got this little character icon, which means go ahead and change your character's appearance. And in this particular game, we've called it a Bodymatic 2000. You can really call it anything you want. Basically, this is just an UMA character, and so I'm just displaying automatically whatever UMA options my game found here. And it's just sort of pretty basic for now, but you know we can expand that in the future pretty easily. I didn't want characters that look really gimped, and if you've ever used the UMA character creator, you can make some pretty funny looking guys with like hands that are like 10 times the size of their head, which is a little bit unrealistic. You can change back and forth between female and male, but we're just going to stay with a male character for the purpose of this one. Also, actually, you can see appearance here. The only option for the female is basically the hair. She doesn't have the beard or goatee and whatnot. I don't have the accessory programmed in yet, though, or any of the other overlays. Those will be added in a little bit, probably. So let's actually just, we'll go back to mail here, and we're going to save this and close that, and now we have a nice awesome UMA character. Cool, we're not a soul anymore. So you can see the Bodymatic 2000 up here is also sort of based on prerequisites, so let's just take a look at that. We're looking at the Bodymatic 2000 unit, and the Bodymatic 2000 unit, actually technically he has a name change interactable. We can't interact with it yet, and we can't see it because of the fact that we have not turned in this next quest in case of emergency. But because we have turned in a second chance, we had the character creator interactable available to us, and that change my name objective that we saw earlier. The objective will match a lot of things. It'll match like the name of the interactable, the name of the parent unit. It's kind of a fuzzy match. It's going to match 4 or 5 different things, I think. So if we look actually at the Guardian of Souls again, we can see that we were able to give the quest objective the objective of literally change my name just by giving the interaction panel title on the interactable change my name. So that's how we showed that up in the quest. So let's head down now because we have completed this quest here. There's no fall damage in the engine yet, so you can fall as long as you want. Also, note that when I put my mouse over this guy now, although we get the little mouse over window that appeared down there, we're not getting the yellow color anymore, and that's because the yellow color is only available when there's actually a current interaction available with any particular unit. And because he doesn't have any current quests available or available to complete, nothing shows up. Next, we're looking at in case of emergency, and you can see we've got a bunch of ability rewards here. So let's just go take a look at in case of emergency as well. So here is in case of emergency, and there we go. On the ability reward list, quests can include rewards that are items, their faction, ability, experience, skills. So you can give a lot of different rewards for quests, and in this case we've got quite a few abilities, actually 10 abilities we're going to gain from this quest here, and you'll just see those pop up on our action bars here. We also just got an achievement here, and let's just go take a look at that. So if we hit our character panel here and take a look at our achievements, you'll see an achievement called I Know Kung Fu. Achievements are technically quests, so if we hit I Know Kung Fu, we can see literally it's just a quest. But the difference between this quest and any other quest is that it's marked is achievement, which means that as soon as you load the game, so long as this thing hasn't already been turned in, it's already, basically it's just going to accept itself automatically without being in your quest log. So it's basically like a quest that automatically just accepts itself and is always listening for events for this kind of stuff at any given time. And that's why we were able to just get that thing without ever seeing it show up in our quest log, which if we hit our L button here is right here, showing that we have 1 out of 25 quests right now living on a prayer. Technically, you know, there are like a bunch of hidden achievements right now that are kind of hiding away and just automatically accepted by the game listening, so we'll see those in a little bit. This quest here, living on a prayer, just requires us to use an ability. So let's just take a look at that quest here, living on a prayer. And we have an ability objective 1, blessing of the makers, require use. So if I didn't have this require use box checked here, then we would only be required to learn the ability in order for this quest objective to be complete. But since require use is there, we actually have to use it. So let's cast it. And now the quest is complete because the quest was basically listening for event messages that are getting sent out whenever we actually use abilities. So now we're going to see a new type of interactable here. And we've got another ability reward here. And the minute that we accept this, I'm just going to point this out because this is all going to really happen so fast. The Fountain of Time will basically become a cutscene interactable here. So let's actually just go look at him before that happens. Fountain of Time interactable, and he's got the cutscene interactable object on him right here. And so what happens is we've got 2 prerequisite conditions here. One, like we've seen before, it's a positive match, which basically means that so long as Visions of the Past is a quest that is in your log, then this thing is automatically available. And we've also got a reverse match, basically, that says that so long as Visions of the Past is complete, but since we're reversing that, basically, that means that Visions of the Past is not marked as complete. There's no OR logic yet, it's all AND logic. So basically what this accomplishes is by having like this sort of like OR and XOR thing here, he will only be a valid interactable so long as I have accepted that quest, but that quest is not yet complete. And I think we'll probably see very, very briefly a little play button icon appear over his head here. No, okay, that's right, because the quest icon actually outranks everything. Okay, it looks like I've got some ambient volume in this scene here. Maybe we'll just get that turned down a little bit. Okay, let's actually just go back into our settings here, because if we look at the Birch Grove scene node right here, then you can see there it is. We've got no music clip in that zone, but we do have an ambient audio clip, and that we heard because if we go into our settings menu here, I never turned down the ambient volume. There we go. Okay. So now this quest is complete, and that particular cutscene interactable, once again, no longer available. So that cutscene is basically just there as long as you haven't actually viewed it. So it instantly becomes unavailable as long as you viewed it, because viewing it was like the objective for the quest there. And that actually, I think, Visions of the Past, let's just take a look at that for a second. So you can see, yeah, we had a use interactable objective called Look into the Past, and Look into the Past would have been actually the name assigned to the Fountain of Times cutscene interactable here, Look into the Past. So that's how we did that one there. And now we've got another interactable here. You'll notice that this thing basically just spawned, and it wasn't available or even visible to us before that first time that we ran up the stairs. So if we look at the Birch Grove teleport crystal here, this one here is configured with a spawn prefab, and that spawn prefab, unlike the Fountain of Time, where that basically that mesh render he has was just stuck on top of his unit here and available from the time that the game started, this particular interactable, it wasn't like that. What happened is we've got this Unity prefab here, and that Unity prefab spawned based on one of his units having prerequisite conditions here. So this inanimate unit object here, which is like a type of interactable, had a prerequisite that we had turned in the Back to the Future quest, and then that caused this spawn prefab to be able to show up now. So you can create like just dynamic content that can appear in your level basically at any time based on pretty much any one of those prerequisite conditions, and you'll see how powerful those are later as we've got other prerequisites that are going to let us do some pretty neat things here. For the teleport crystal interactable here, we've got a portal interactable on it, and that's where we're seeing that little compass icon here, and on the mini map that's basically linked in that master configuration I showed you earlier to portal interactables. And this portal interactable, look at that, it's got a prerequisite condition. Let's see what it is. The prerequisite condition is that Back to the Future has been turned in as well. So not only is that required for it to spawn, but it's also required for it to actually be able to use this portal. And this is just linked to an ability, and we'll get a little bit more into the abilities in a little here. So this one, when you click on this interactable to use it, you will automatically cast this ability right here. So we can see the abilities casting now. And a couple of things happened there. We had like a little spawn prefab and we had a cast bar. So that's the first time basically that we've seen those. And so before we go any further, let's actually go jump in and touch on that for a second. So looking at the ability here, this ability is called Teleport Birch Grove. And if we go into the Teleport Birch Grove scriptable object, we can see that this is a direct ability. It's got an icon, a description. That animation that we were doing, that sort of like hand waving thing that happened while we were casting, is based on this animation clip right here. And that's basically just going to swap out that animation into the character controller, because there's an animation slot that we can swap animations into anytime that we want. This usable without learning box is important because basically that means that we're able to use this ability without actually learning it. So if this ability is linked to any interactable in the world, then it doesn't have to be in our ability book in order for us to use it. And this casting prefab here was just like a spell effect that's downloaded from the Unity asset store, and it's just going to appear at a Y location of 1, so 1 meter above the ground, offset like by your character's position there. And it casts an ability effect called the Teleport Birch Grove effect, which is a teleport effect, and we'll look at that really quickly here. The teleport effect here basically just has a level name, and the level name is Birch Grove. So what's going to happen is our scene manager is going to look through all of our scene nodes, or sorry, all the nodes actually that we put into our Unity build, and it's actually going to look for a scene called Birch Grove somewhere in the Unity build list, and then go ahead and load that for us. Let's just jump out and take a look at the ability system in a little bit more depth here, because a lot of it is not necessarily going to make sense unless you've seen this part of it first. It's a little complex to try to just describe without a picture. So if you go to the AnyRPG.org website, you can see a list of pretty much everything that you can configure with scriptable objects, and you can click on any of these and see basically all the options that you can configure with them. So these are the things that we're going through right now. The ability system, though, the way that it works is that we've got abilities and ability effects. And the abilities basically are just sort of cast timers, or they determine when something can be cast. And it uses an inheritance model. So we have a base ability abstract class here, and then we've got these animated abilities, and animated abilities can be cast when an event occurs. So let's just go in and take a look at that. One of the abilities on our bars is Brazilian Kick. Yeah, there we go, Brazilian Kick. So if we look at this Brazilian Kick animation here, and let's just see if we can find it here. Okay, we've got this Brazilian Kick animation, and there we go. If I look at the animation tab here, you can see that I've got this hit event right here, like frame 18 or whatever. This event basically tells us that we're now allowed to actually go ahead and cast the spell. So for animated abilities, an animated ability literally we kick something, and that tells us we can cast the spell, and we'll see examples of all these coming up here in a little bit. The next type of abilities are channeled abilities, and those are we'll cover those as well. And then we have complete abilities right here, and this is the type of ability we just saw. So your cast bar basically has to go all the way through and hit the very end, and then you're actually allowed to use these particular abilities, and now you can actually cast an effect and actually do something with it. So moving down, effects is how the ability system accomplishes all of its heavy lifting. So we've got this base effect class here, and then this sort of like giant tree. I'm using an inheritance model here really because it makes the most sense. What we really need with our ability system is for it to be flexible and extremely predictable. And the only way we're going to get that predictable behavior is by ensuring that all common code all the way down through this inheritance model is running, so that we're not duplicating a lot of code, because all of these things share a lot of this base behavior here. In the case of, for example, like my unit objects themselves in Unity, like let's just go look at my UMA star unit, my default UMA player unit. You can see that in this case, I'm making heavy use of composition, not inheritance. We've got like a lot of different objects on these things to control their behavior. But in the case of the ability system, inheritance really was the most efficient way to accomplish this. So essentially, we've got three sort of main groups of ability effects, and you can chain these things together, and I'll show you how that works later. But group one is a targeting and timing, and this is responsible for letting us do AoEs or send projectiles flying at things, and basically determining when the next effect in the chain can be activated. We have these attached effects, which are status effects, and they're status buffs, and you can actually see we've got one of those on us right now. So we've got this Blessing of the Maker's ability on us from when we cast it earlier, and this is a buff that's doing everything you can see in the tooltip there. And so that counts as the attached class of ability effects. And what that means is it's not like some ephemeral thing where you're just going to basically create some sort of spell effect prefab and then delete it after a couple seconds. This actually ends up getting tracked, this particular ability, on the character and attached to an array where we track its status and can make nodes display on screen like that status bar that we saw. The third major class of ability effects is the act on self and others ability effects. And these are the things that actually do something. Like the status effect itself, it can't take any positive action. It can mess with your stats, yeah, and it can itself cast additional effects, but it itself doesn't have any particular actions it can take. Actions like reduce health, reduce mana, add health, mana, resurrect, teleport, move the thing to a different screen. Those are basically what do sort of the heavy lifting of the abilities, and they're the things that actually do stuff. If it sounds really technical, do stuff, but that's exactly what they do, stuff. Abilities don't do anything except for tell the ability effects when they can do their stuff. So let's jump back in and we'll just keep going here. So we're going to go through this, and this is just standard stuff. This quest is available at any time. Now we've got the storage chest here, and this is also sort of pretty standard to what we've seen so far. There's an interactable on here. This interactable will not become available until I've actually completed the quest. So when I right click it, you can see this window right here pops up sort of behind, and for the most part we can usually ignore it, because what's going to happen is this window will show me all of the current interactions for all of the interactables on an object, and we'll see in a little while here some examples of where there are actually objects that have multiple interactables available to us at any given time. And a single interactable showing up here that's like currently available to us, it'll just auto pop it all the time. And that's why when we click on him, we get first this little window here that has the quest, and then the quest itself just automatically pops up for us. And now we've got some more prerequisites met, and what happened here was basically invisibly in the background, when that quest became unavailable, then the bank became the only valid interaction for this interactable, and therefore just automatically pop the bank window. And the bank window is actually doing a hidden thing, and it's actually closing that other thing in the background, because like it realizes it's the only valid interaction, so there's no point in showing that window there. If we right click on this bag here, we're going to pop that into our inventory, and we're going to see a bag. So let's take a look at how this is working, because this behavior right here is also configured by Scriptable Objects. So we can look at this. Actually, let's look backpack right here. Backpack. So backpack is a scriptable object. It's a bag, and bags are basically items, and this bag has 20 slots, and so that number right there is why when we went and equipped that thing, we got 20 slots right here. You can see there's also this bank right here, and it's got a 48 slot bag, and basically exact same idea, 48 slots for your default bank. Now that we've completed that quest, the prerequisite is met for this vendor over here to actually sell us stuff, and he's got a bunch of stuff to sell us. Let's just take a look at that and see how that's all working. So here's our GM vendor over here, and he's got a lot of different stuff on him, lots of use of composition there. So the vendor has a prerequisite for this particular interactable to show up on him that I got the good stuff has been turned in. That's why it didn't show up until we actually turned that quest in. And he sells 42 different items. The vendor page, or the vendor book there, is hard-coded to a maximum of 10 per page. So 42 items is 5 pages full. You can see there's only 2 items on the last page here. Each item has a price and a currency. So let's just take a look at that. What are we looking at right here? Small health potion, sure. Okay, so there you go. You can see the small health potion. It's a health potion, which is a type of item, scriptable object, and it's going to refill health when you use it, and it costs this particular currency and this much of this currency. Currency also is a scriptable object. In this case, we've got goblin ears, gold, and silver configured for our game. We don't have like a default currency yet, but I'm going to add that in the future so that you can see sort of how much like money you have of your default currency in places other than just this panel here. Because currently, if you want to look at your character's currencies, you can click your currency tab. We're currently broke. We've got no currencies of any type at all because we haven't gotten any off monsters yet, and we start the game poor, broken, naked, pretty much. So we're not going to be able to buy anything from this guy, so let's just go over here, and a little help from my friends, that quest right here. So we actually technically, we had 2 dialogues with this quest here. It had an opening dialogue right here, and that was the stuff that we did like right after we saw the cutscene when we talked to the fountain there. And then if you look at the objectives here, it's also got a dialogue objective. So in order for us to even be able to accept the quest, we have to complete that opening dialogue, which is automatically named the same thing as the title of the quest. And then we also, in order to be able to complete the quest, we have to complete this other dialogue right here, find help. So we're going to go in here, we're going to complete this dialogue, and now we can finally complete the quest. We're going to see a new type of interactable showing up here in a minute here, so I am ready. Go through that, accept a quest. Okay, cool. So now we have this new pop-up window here. You can see join new faction, and Sir Invincible now has a faction change interactable sign over his head, and also that popped up on the mini map, and you know his base interactable window here is showing only that single interaction as well. So going back to the faction, you can see it says that we learn some abilities here, and this is a little small, but these are both available at level 5. So if we go back and we look at the Sun Sworn faction here. There we go. We got a learned ability list. So joining this faction will give us access to these abilities. And then if you look at, like, it doesn't list the level restriction here, but if I type in Warming Ray, then you can see that this one has a required level of 5. And so that's why it looks a little bit grayed out there and says available at level 5. So we're now going to join this faction, and now we can complete that quest because the quest had another one of those use interactable things that we've already seen. And we can see that we've got this new ability on our bar, Solar Radiation, that we learned from our faction. And we can see that now over top of our character's head, we also have the Sunsworn faction. And suddenly these guys are all green to us. If you recall, they were yellow just a minute ago because the Sunsworn faction is neutral to everybody by default, with a default disposition of 0, unlike the Children of the Forged Souls we saw earlier, who were automatically friendly to everyone. So now we're going to get to do another quest, and this quest, there we go, so we got 2 quests here. So if you've seen so far that a bunch of these quests that I've been doing have been auto-completing, basically this is just the title of the quest right here as the objective, and the quest really, it doesn't have any objectives, which technically means that it's automatically complete the minute that you accept it. Looking at the Night of the Living Bunnies here, we can see this one's got a bunch of different objectives here. So let's just go in and take a look at that quest for a second. So here's the quest scriptable object here, and you can see that we've got 1 kill objective. We have to kill an amount of 5 of the type Angry Reanimated Bunny, and this is that sort of fuzzy matching, so it's going to match like the name of the character unit or even the character's faction or the character's class. So we can type this in here and have a lot of flexibility in how we're naming these things here. We have to learn 1 trade skill, skinning, and we have to use Solar Radiation 5 times because we've got that 1 ability objective. And then we have a new thing here called a quest objective. Now, the name may sound a little bit silly, but technically these down here are all quest objectives as the base class, so quest objective was what it had to be named. Basically what this means is we actually have to complete the quest, a light armor, in order for this objective to be satisfied. So this 1 master quest will remain in our log until this other quest is actually complete. And that's a little different than what we've seen so far, where quests were prerequisites, which meant you had to complete this quest before you can accept the next one, whereas this one has the quest as an objective, which means you have to complete that quest before you can complete this quest. So let's go do that. And now we can see that we have this quest, a light suit of armor, in our log, and it has its own set of objectives that we have to use here, collect objective and learn trade skill objective. So now this guy has a list of trade skills available for us, and once again we can see this main master settings was responsible for telling us that trade skill guys get these things over their head. Take a look at the mini map as I accept these trade skills. All of the spawn nodes here, you can see the iron ore, for example. When I hover my mouse over it, it's not turning yellow. I'm just getting the little window here. But if I go ahead and learn mining, then suddenly it's going to turn yellow. So I'm going to learn also skinning, logging, and herbalism. And you can see that on our mini-map, suddenly some herbalism nodes showed up here because they're now available because now we know herbalism. So I'm just going to move these around a little bit so that we've got a more convenient button set up here. These ones are like abilities I'm not going to have to cast very often. And I'm going to move this dot right down here. So now we get a chance to demonstrate these animated abilities as well as the status effects here. So I'm going to hit the bunny with Solar Radiation, and the first thing that you'll see is he's got like a little spell effect prefab that appears over him. He's taking some damage, and he's got actually a dot over here on his bars, which actually just switched to another dot, the lootable dot, which is also controlled or attached to this spell effect. So let's just take a look at those 2 things. We had Solar Radiation here. Solar Radiation was an ability, and that ability has a casting time of 0. Where are we here? Ability casting time 0 there. And that tells us that this ability is just available to be instantly casted the minute that you click it, as long as you had enough mana for it. So that triggered a status effect on the target, and that spell can only be cast on an enemy. I can't accidentally cast it on myself, and the target has to also be alive in order for me to be able to cast this ability, because there are certain things like resurrection that you don't want to cast on people who are already alive, so those ones are actually going to require a dead target. Going into the solar burn dot here, this status effect gets attached to the enemy character, and that's why when our unit frame um, clicked on that mouse, we can actually see all the status effects, well, at least the first 7 anyway, that are attached to him. Because that bar has a hard limit of 7 effects that it's actually going to show, but he can have essentially an unlimited number of effects on him. Next, we come up to this tick ability effect list here, and that has a size of 1 and an element of the solar burn dot tick attack, which means that every tick rate, so every 1 second, we are going to hit this target with this particular ability. This will last for 10 seconds, and it has this solar energy prefab that we saw that's going to spawn basically with a target as its parent, which is how it's managing to follow that guy around and just automatically stay 1 Y unit, so 1 meter above his pivot position. If we look at the solar burn dot tick attack that got triggered, once again, this is an effect. Remember that effects can call other effects, and we can make as complex spells as we want out of chaining these things together. So this particular one has a health, it's an attack effect, and so the health amount basically is going to be removed from the character. The amount thing is part of a base class called a mount effect. So if this was a heal effect, then we would see a health base amount of 5, and it would be healing the character instead. So that's why this is called basically just health amount rather than like attack or damage amount. That's about it for this one. It just, every time it gets called, it just does that much damage. Although we've got a prefab lifetime, there's no prefab, so nothing really is going to happen there. We've also got this lootable effect here, so let's just take a look at that for a second. So what happens is this lootable effect is actually part of our game manager here. Actually, let's just take a look at that also. So you can see loot sparkle ability is this loot sparkle direct ability, and basically the system is automatically going to cast this particular status effect on anything at its moment of death if it's got loot available, which is going to trigger this status effect, which is going to go ahead and put those stars on the target, and this is only available to dead targets, which means that the minute if this thing ever gets resurrected, that this effect will just auto cancel itself because it will no longer be considered to be on a valid target. So we're going to loot this thing, right click on it, and we're just going to take all that loot. Talking about loot, I don't think we've actually looked at lootable characters yet, so let's just do that really quickly. So angry reanimated bunny unit over here. And the angry reanimated bunny unit has a lootable character on it, and he's also got a loot table on him as well. So his loot table has a single item leather with a 100% drop rate, and this particular drop is dependent on this prerequisite condition, the fact that you have the skill skinning. So if you don't have skinning, you're not going to get leather off him. That's how we're accomplishing skinning in this game at this particular point. We don't have like a separate ability where we're going to go through and skin him like a spell or anything like that. So next up, let's take a look at the animated abilities. I already showed earlier how these things are going to basically do their effect when they hit a unit. So we're going to cast this spell, the bunny's going to aggro us. If we right click, we're going to go into auto attack mode and just go through a series of unarmed attacks. And actually, let's take a look at that. So that's also a scriptable object, human unarmed attacks. So this animation profile is attached to the character, and I'll show you how we attach that in a second here. And basically this animation profile nodes, which is probably badly named, it should probably be like attack animation profile nodes. He will just randomly pick one of any of these 8 animations, and hit the unit with it with an auto attack, basically. And when that animation hits its hit event, then it's actually going to do its damage. So you actually have to make contact with the guy. We're not using colliders or anything like that, but as long as this animation is allowed to complete, like you don't try to run away or move in the middle of it, then it'll do its damage. And the rest of the animations that we're seeing here, all of his movement and stuff is going to be controlled by this list of animations in this animation profile. So we'll see how we can swap these out here in a minute once we get the armor and some weapons and stuff. So let's hit this guy with a dot. We'll watch him come over at us. I'm going to put a real cool kick on the front there. And a nice punch as well. Okay, so spinning kick. Alright, and hit this guy with a dot. We'll just get him down really quickly. Spinning kick, do like a uppercut here, Brazilian kick, and he's dead. Let's see, high kick, jab. What you see here also as well is a result of dispositions also. So this guy over here, this Apprentice Craftsman here, let's just actually take a look at him. So Apprentice Craftsman. So this Apprentice Craftsman unit has, just a second, where is it? Maybe it says character. There we go. He has a faction. The faction is Sunsworn. The Bunnies, the Angry Reanimated Bunnies, on the other hand, have a faction of Undead. So if we are to look at the Undead faction that the Bunnies belong to, which is another scriptable object here, the Undead faction has a default disposition of -1. So when two factions are looking at each other and deciding what they're going to do to each other, basically, the lowest default disposition wins, basically, and so that means that essentially they're both going to hate each other because the bunny has the lower default disposition. And since neither of them have special dispositions toward each other, then that default one is going to win. Items, let's see, actually, let's just take a look at that. So we just got a bunch of items as rewards from that quest, and so that quest was a light suit of armor, and we were required to learn leatherworking and then have a collect objectives of 5 leather, and then he gives us back all of these item rewards as well. Let's take a look at those items because I'm just going to start equipping them now. So fighter's leather boots is armor, and it's going to give me a stat boost of 10 damage, 10 stamina, and 10 agility. That's pretty much it. It's an UMA recipe, so it's just going to apply this UMA recipe directly to my character. The engine is designed exclusively around UMA recipes as the way for swapping things out, just to make things really simple. So you can see all my UMA stuff now applied to my character, and basically, yeah, hey, we're like twins now, pretty much. And because I completed that light suit of armor quest, I now have that quest objective fulfilled. Let's see here. Okay, great. So this is another one of those quests where I've actually got 4 sub-quests as quest objectives. So we're just going to go back over here. And now I've got another quest in my log. I'm going to have to go through a whole chain before I actually even get those quests. Let's just stop for a second and look at the Herbalism node here, because we haven't really concentrated too much on that. So I just got 5 mushrooms from that node. So let's take a look at the spotted mushroom herbalism node. So this herbalism node, same thing, it's an interactable. Interactable herbalism or any gathering nodes all have loot tables on them, and essentially the loot table is exactly like a monster's loot table. It's got its own set of prerequisite conditions and items and drop chances. For gathering nodes, any item is going to get randomly between like a 1 in 5 or 1 in 6 copies of this thing. So a 100% chance to drop means that every time for one of those like random 1 or 5 times, it's gonna have a 100% chance of giving you some. So that's why I got 5 of them. If I attack the bunny now, you'll see that not only am I taking less damage, 10 as opposed to the regular 15, but I'm also doing way more, like 80 as opposed to like the 25 or whatever. My health as well, Bunny is like 400 health, which was what I was before I put this armor on, and I'm 1100 health because of all of the extra stats that I got for it. My overall health is based on my stamina. It's basically just my stamina times 10, and my mana is pretty much just my intellect times 10. And we do get a spell power boost as a result of our mana. So our spell power is intellect over 2. Damage is based on strength, so damage is strength over 2, so 60 over 2 is 30, and then we get an additional 50 direct damage from just the damage stat on this particular leather armor that we're using. So now I have to collect more stuff, so same thing, loot tables, drop chances, etc. for that as anything else. Same thing for this other herbalism node over here. You can see on our mini-map that when this herbalism node spawns, we get a mini-map icon showing up. If I zoom out here with my middle mouse wheel on the mini-map, you can see a few more icons, and that's all this other stuff over here, like for example this mining node. Talking about that mining node, you may notice actually that these disappear. Let's see, we'll just do a really obvious one here. And the tree is gone. So if we look at that node, we've got a birch tree logging node, and it drops this lumber here, and it's also of course got this birch tree prefab, which is automatically just going to be removed after we loot the thing because it is a gathering node. And then 5 seconds later, which is the spawn timer here, it'll respawn. We could set that to whatever we want, but in order to make this demo go quicker, we've got these things respawning super fast. So now we've got all this stuff that was like a pile of collect objectives, as well as trade skill objectives. And now we've got more collect objectives on these quests over here, and we can craft these. So while we're in the middle of crafting those, let's just go take a look at that, because that is actually a new type of scriptable object. In this case, the iron bar is a recipe. So that recipes list that I showed you right here, you can see all the recipes on the side there. Those are showing up automatically when I open this particular interactable, because being a blacksmithing interactable, it's automatically going to show all abilities in the game that it finds that have this blacksmithing ability attached to them. For the recipe, we've got a input item, so crafting materials, we just need 1 iron ore, and an output of 1 iron bar. So we're just going to craft all these. We have as many as we need now. We can cancel that, and we'll just go over to this other crafting table. Now this right here, you can see this 3 dots right here. That's actually configurable in the game manager, and where are we here? Multiple interaction nameplate image. So if you have more than 1 interaction, it's going to show you those 3 dots, which means there's multiple valid actions. And this is where now we can see this window here has 4 things on it, whereas usually the ones we've seen before had just sort of been 1 thing. And that's because this crafting table, we just decided to put a lot of stuff on it and make you able to do a lot of stuff while you're at it. And now that I've collected all these things, I can go back in and turn in this quest, and now I can finally get those other 4 quests, which are the prerequisites to completing a hard day's work over here. So let's just go through and craft those real quick. We're just going to watch our bag space here, make sure we don't accidentally fill up our bags. In fact, to make things even easier, what we're going to do is we're just going to grab a bunch more flax here, and we're just going to make some linen out of it. 3 is all we will need, and then we can make one of these 12 slot bags here, and then we can equip it, and now we're not nearly so lacking on bag space. Going back into tailoring, we need to make the hood, robe, and boots still, so we'll do that. Maybe I need some more linen. Okay. Still need the robe. There we go. Now all those objectives are complete. And we get to see the next part of the scriptable objects now. So we're going to throw on this armor here and put this sword in our hands. And you'll notice as we run around forward with this sword, we're carrying it like that. And we've switched stances. So that's because the dragon blade, which is a scriptable object right here, which is a weapon, has... Oh yeah, we haven't covered those yet. I'll show you those too. So we've got some learned abilities, which means that anytime that you equip this thing, you're going to learn all of these abilities. And when we hit people with it, we're going to hear this sound rather than the sound that we heard with the bunnies. And I'll just turn the volume up for a sec so you can hear that once we start hitting people. As well, this thing, there we go. It has a two-handed sword animation profile. That's what I was looking for. So if we look at this other animation profile scriptable object for the two-handed swords, we've only got one auto attack with this, not nearly as many as the kung fu moves there. But you can see like our jog forward, where are we here, move forward fast clip is now a two-handed combat run, and a bunch of other ones are now like two-handed based animations as well. So you can see as well this ability here, front quick kick, is now grayed out and it says required unarmed. So if we go back in and we look at front kick over here, we can see that front kick has a weapon affinity of unarmed. And if we look at our dragon blade here, we can see that our dragon blade has a weapon affinity of sword two-handed rather than unarmed. And so what that means is that those other abilities that had a weapon affinity of unarmed, whatever affinity the weapon that you currently have equipped is, if it doesn't match, these things become unavailable, because it really wouldn't make sense to be doing all these like ninja moves and stuff while we have this great big giant two-hander in our hand. And similarly, it wouldn't make sense to be double slashing a guy with our fists or our feet. So that's why these abilities over here all have a weapon affinity of sword two-handed. Looks like I forgot to make myself some gloves of hammer. And for that, I will need one more linen. Alright, and now we can turn that in. Okay, so next we see this zombie spawning over here. And actually, so you'll notice that he continued attacking that other guy for a while, and that's because all units have aggro tables, and the amount of aggro they have is based on the amount of damage that anyone has done to them at any given time. So any NPC will always just be attacking the top aggroing, or the unit with the most aggro on his list. Now that zombie, you'll notice that the zombie was not running around attacking us and killing our base while we were naked there. And that's because we have a zombie attack spawner that's sitting in the middle of the base controlling this guy here. And it's going to spawn a zombie unit at a dynamic level every 5 seconds with a maximum unit count of 1. So basically, as soon as the other guy despawns, 5 seconds later, another zombie will show up. It's point based, so it's going to spawn at the exact same spot. But the important thing here is these prerequisite conditions. So this unit will only be spawning mobs so long as the prerequisite condition that you are on the zombie attack is met, and that the zombie attack quest is not yet complete. So you can create dynamic events this way. And actually, let's turn the volume back up a little bit here just so we can hear some of the sword clicks here. Whoops, apologies if that's a little loud. Let's try that again. I think that's a little better. Let's see. Oh yeah, there we go. Oh, maybe I might have to turn up the desktop audio a little bit more so that you can hear that. Okay, let's see if you can hear that now. There we go. Nice and loud. Let's turn that back down now. Okay. All right, so the next thing that we see here is, yeah, my guys are dead. So we're going to equip this initiate's staff over here. We're going to cast a warming ray on ourselves so we can get this quest done. We're going to cast a couple of these debuffs here on this guy and just like nuke him with this life drain thing. You'll notice we're taking 0 damage. That's because if you look at my stat, I've got 27 armor, which gives me static 27 points of damage reduction, and this guy's a little bit of a wimp, so he's not doing more than 27 points of damage. And so he's not going to be doing any damage to me at all because everything is just getting taken away directly by the damage reduction. And he's coming back, so we'll just help our guys kill him because we need our quest givers to be alive so we can actually turn in this quest here. Dead quest givers will not turn in quests for you. Okay, awesome. So now that you'll notice that the zombies actually, let's see, we'll just loot this guy here. The zombies won't spawn anymore, and that's because this quest is marked as complete, even though we haven't turned it in yet. So that was the condition for it. I'm just going to put my sword back in my hand and go through and accept these quests. Okay, and now I'm going to demonstrate something else here basically. So this zombie, you'll see he's not actually going to drop anything, but the other guy will, the Skeleton Slayer over here. And when I loot him, you'll see a window basically pop up when I hit take all right here. And actually, let's take a look at the silver as well, because that's also kind of interesting. So you'll notice that I keep on looting this stuff. It's not appearing in my log right here. That's because these are on use items. So if I look at 10 silver right here, it's a currency item, and it will automatically be used as soon as I put it into my log, at which point it will assign me 10 of the silver right here. Right there, currency node. 10 silver also sells for 10 silver, so you can't make any money selling it basically. There's an exchange factor here that you can see later. There's like this gold unit right here, and you can buy the gold for 100 silver. This is the way that we're accomplishing exchange rates right now because there's no automatic exchanging of currency in the game. The other thing that we saw was this condensed elemental death that dropped off the guy, and this is a special type of scriptable object, a quest start item, and quest start items are allowed to have quests assigned to them, which will automatically pop into your log the minute that you loot this thing, or if you loot multiple at once, the first one will pop, the rest of them will go into your log for you to right click on it and start the quests manually. The particular quest it starts is called Elemental Death, and we have 4 ability rewards from this quest, but we're also using this max ability reward feature right here, which limits us to 1 ability reward total. We just get to choose 1 out of all the ones that are available. So you'll see when I hit take all here, I get options, and I can only click 1 at a time. And it doesn't let me click on things that I already learned previously. So we're going to take this blood shield here. All right, moving forward, we have a quest to go kill a bunch of undead and then kill their ringleader as well. And these guys, they're all level 3 right now, and that is because they all spawned in at the same time I did. When they respawn, because they're dynamic level mobs, they will keep up to me in level. I'm just going to use this crazy overpowered ability right here, Life Tether Aoe, and just AoE down everyone. So talking about AoE abilities, let's actually take a look at that for a second. So Life Tether Aoe, because this actually has a really cool effect attached to it. So this Life Tether Aoe is a channeled ability, which means that every tick rate, 1 second, it's going to cast this Life Tether Aoe effect. Going into Life Tether Aoe effect, it's an Aoe effect with a radius of 40. And if we go back to our documentation here, you'll see from our AoE effects, the AoE effects are targeting and timing. Once again, they can't do anything themselves, just like this channeled effect that casted the AoE effect was just a timing effect that couldn't actually do anything itself either. So looking at the hit ability effect list, what's going to happen is it considers all targets that are enemies to be valid targets, and then it's going to attempt to hit them with this channeled effect here, which is this Life Tether channel. The Life Tether channel effect, also a channeled effect, which has a hit of ability of Life Tether attack. Going over to Life Tether attack, this is in that category down there of stuff that actually does stuff, and we've got a health base amount of 5. However, not only does it do stuff, but because it's an ability effect and is using all that base code it's inheriting from, it itself can, when it hits people, cast another effect. So it's going to cast the Life Tether AoE heal effect, which once again is an AoE effect, but this time we can cast it on self and friendly, not enemies. So all friendly targets are a valid healing target. We can see this special little thing right here we haven't seen yet called the input multiplier. The input multiplier is going to multiply all incoming amounts, like health and mana amounts, which are basically sent through every time an ability casts another ability. It will send as its output however much damage it managed to do, or health or mana healing or whatever it managed to do, as an input to the next ability for that next ability to process. So basically, whatever the health amount was that we damaged the enemy for is going to be sent into an input to the health amount field. And when we go into Life Tether heal tick, because it's a heal effect, then health amount on healing effects, even though you can see is 0, because it's got an input multiplier as well, it's going to basically heal the guys for 50% of whatever health amount was passed to it. So basically it's going to heal you for 50% of whatever damage that you did. And this is sorry. And this is probably the best example of how we can chain all these different groups and classes of effects together in order to accomplish some pretty neat things with a bunch of really simple building blocks. continuing on, we're going to see something else new here as well. The Skeleton Warrior unit. And the Skeleton Warrior unit, let's see if I can find the thing that actually controls this here. He's got, there, a Toughness Rating. So in general, your stats are, go to the game view, see that disappeared? It disappeared, okay. In general, your stats are 10 times your level. So I am level 8, therefore my stamina is 80, which is 10 times 8. With this toughness rating here, 3, it's a linear rating, so it triples all of his stats. If I set it to 4, all of his stats would be quadrupled. So we're also looking at a new type of spawn unit here, or unit spawner. So this Skeleton Warrior spawner is, just a second, trigger based and point based. So what trigger based and point based means is that it will spawn him at the center point like we're used to, but it'll be spawned based on a trigger, and that trigger is an on enter trigger. So as soon as we enter a trigger collider that's invisible and surrounding this graveyard, then we're going to see this guy spawn, and because of the toughness rating, he's going to be way tougher than anything else we have faced so far. So you can see that he's got 3,000 hit points. He's hitting me for quite a lot. He's actually doing a considerable amount of damage. If I don't watch it, he actually is capable of killing me because he's just that tough. So I'm just gonna keep draining life from him because that's one of the really only ways I can keep ahead of him at this point. And I'm gonna keep using my warming ray here. All right, cool. And he's down. And right as he's down, we're gonna get this other guy come and join the party. Yeah, why don't I just nuke? Wow, okay. This life tether has a huge range, so the AoE radius I think on this was 40 yards, so now I'm going to nuke everything in the graveyard. Let's take some stuff here. Once again, we had one of these on-use things that automatically pops a quest as soon as we get it. We've got another 20 slot bag, so now we can see we got lots of bag space, and let's do this one right here, Bone Staff. So I'm going to equip this, and when we cast on equip, you'll see the Undead Slayer. And the Undead Slayer is an ability that you have their leader's head on a stick, they're too afraid to attack you. So this is the first time basically that we've seen faction buff abilities. So the Undead Slayer Reputation Effect is the status effect, and what it's doing is it's actually got a faction modifier on it. This is another scriptable object, and basically it's going to just hard code my undead faction disposition to -0.5. So you might notice as well that all of the undead are now orange instead of red, and I can wander up to them and they're not going to attack me. And you'll see over here that there's a bunch of goblins, and the goblins are not orange, they are definitely red. And because goblins and undead both have a default disposition of -1, they're unfriendly to each other. It's not like just there's in this game there isn't like a concept of, say, monsters versus friendly players. There's just a concept of factions. So a faction's a faction, and anybody who's a faction with a negative disposition is your enemy by default. So you can see the goblins run up and they start attacking me, but the skeletons are just leaving me alone. They're going to go after the goblins because my faction disposition isn't quite low enough for them to be hostile to me. So technically they're not really afraid of me. They're just unfriendly and not hostile yet. We're going to look at another ability now that I just got, and this one is Levitation Effect. So I'm going to hit this Dark Tentacles, and you're going to see this goblin float up in the air and basically just start doing nothing. He becomes completely unattackable. And that's controlled by this tentacles effect here. If we look at Dark Tentacles status effect, which is the status effect that's being put on him, we've got a little tick box somewhere in here. Levitate Aoe effect. There we go. Sorry, the Dark Tentacles effect is the effect that gets put on me, and it casts one of those AoEs, which does a Levitated Tentacles effect as the, basically the do thing part of this, which is going to levitate the character. Okay, continuing on, we're going to check this one out. This is just standard stuff. This particular inanimate unit is a quest giver. Have we dealt with inanimate quest givers yet? Yes, we have, because technically the Fountain of Time was an inanimate quest giver. This one's kind of special though. It's a trigger. So because it's a trigger, as soon as I walk into it, I get to complete this quest. Noticing here that we have a camera that's sort of focused on my character and focused on this skull at the bottom here. And you can see Crystal Mine entrance here. So if we go into our Unity editor, Crystal Mine, one of these here, Teleport Crystal Mine Portal variant. Yeah, there we go, old mine shaft. So all interactables can have this inanimate unit thing on them, and the inanimate unit basically allows you to actually have a unit frame focused on the thing. So we can basically, our camera is looking at the pivot of this thing and is looking at it from a position of X2 and Y2, which is how we're deciding that we're sort of looking at this 45-degree downward angle towards this thing here. So we'll go back now to our base, and while we're doing that, we're going to look at two other types of scriptable objects that can configure things here, and that's weapons and armor. And you can see now that we've got this other buff here, bone spikes on us, and our sword here has an on hit ability. If you look at the very bottom, it says cast on hit, Rune Sword on hit. So let's go and just look at the Rune Sword, because that's also scriptable object configuration. If we look at the Rune Sword weapon, we can see an on hit ability of Rune Sword on hit. Rune Sword on hit is an ability which is another one of these sort of chained abilities. It does an instant effect which triggers this prefab on the target at a Y position of 1, followed up by an attack effect that does 5 damage and sends 0.1% of the actual amount that it did, not 5, but 5 times whatever your strength was minus his damage reduction, etc., as an input to a healing projectile which spawns at the original target, which is the monster, and creates this fairy meteor effect, which then sends its input into a blood shield heal effect, which is the hit effect of the fairy meteor, which will then heal me for an input multiplier health amount. So once again, just chaining together all these targeting and timing effects in order to accomplish a kind of cool thing. And I'm going to remove my undead buff here, make these guys enemies so that you can see that. Now let's take a look at the bone shield, because the bone shield also does something similarly cool here. The bone shield is a piece of armor that has an on-equip ability of bone spikes, which is a direct ability which does a bone spikes effect, and the bone spikes effect is a status effect which has a reflect effect. And the reflect effect is something that we haven't seen yet. Reflects are basically abilities that automatically get cast on every enemy that hits you. So we're going to basically do a bone spike attack, which is an attack effect which has an input multiplier as well, which basically means, and that's sort of the end of this particular chain here, that however much damage an enemy does on you will be automatically reflected back to them. Now, these guys I think are going to do 0 damage on me because I've got a pretty insane amount of damage reduction. So let's just demonstrate the Rune Sword on hit here. So you can see I'm doing 50 additional damage from that Rune Sword on hit and gaining that back. If we look in my combat log here, one of these will say, yeah, there we go. It takes 50 damage from Lost Soul's Rune Sword hit attack. Alright, cool. So let's go turn these things in here, and we can go on and look at a few more mechanics that the engine supports. For that, we're going to go over to this vendor actually, and we're going to buy one of these condensed elemental lives off of him here. And another one that we should probably demonstrate as well is over here in the fire. Actually, and we'll do an ice one as well. So we can demonstrate, let's see, projectiles, we'll already get some of those here. The one I really want is ice shards. This is a directional ability. And we'll also demonstrate, let's see what else here. Healing Circle. That's a ground targeted ability. And we'll also demo here, oh, Elemental Earth. Well, I'm going to get those anyway, but whoops, what I meant to buy was Elemental Fire. There. Cool. Fire Destruction Aura. Should pretty much do, you know what, maybe we'll grab Blizzard as well. So let's go here and we'll grab a Blizzard ability. Yeah, Blizzard Aura. Perfect. That's a good selection. That'll give us a good demonstration of basically every possible combination of spell effect that we can chain together, because these are some pretty cool effects. So we're going to start off with Ice Shards, and let's just take a look at the scriptable object for that. So basically Ice Shards is a channeled ability, and every tick it's going to do an Ice Shards directional. Ice Shards directional is technically an AoE effect, but if you look at the way it's configured, it's actually using extents rather than a radius, which gives us the possibility to extend this thing out actually in front of our character. So every 0.25 seconds, it's going to hit with an Ice Bolt hit attack to anything within those extents. Let's just look what that looks like. Boom, straightforward, and it's just destroying this poor little bunny here. Yeah, because he's still like level 4. He's gray to us now. Yeah, easy peasy. Looking back into my currency tab, you can see that all this stuff that I've been collecting here, gold, goblin ears, lots of silver. So as I collect these stuff, on my mini map, you can also see these lootable items here telling me that I should loot these guys. And it looks like I just found a way to freeze up Unity somehow. Neat. I am running, by the way, on this particular demo, a version of Unity that they're not supporting anymore. I should probably upgrade my project, but because this project is so big, it takes a long time in order to actually upgrade it. Well, this thing's loading here. You know what we can do? I can actually continue just demonstrating those abilities in the engine here by just going ahead and loading up a copy of the 0.32 alpha build. So just give me a sec and I will load that up. Perfect, there we go. I can actually demonstrate the rest of this stuff without going into that level there. Because I've got a saved character here who I'm just going to load from. We're going to load Wizards or Us here. And let me just check, make sure that volume is not coming through too loud. Okay, I think it's okay. My desktop audio is not showing too incredibly loud. Let's just load this guy here. And I'm just going to turn all that sound all the way down here. Okay. Continuing along, this guy has a whole pile of abilities which we can demonstrate some pretty cool stuff with. So let's do Fire Destruction Aura. Fire Destruction Aura is going to basically make me into a turret. So you can see I'm launching one fireball every 1 second basically. And how this is functioning is this is exactly the same as the AoE Scriptable Objects that we saw before, but it's got a maximum unit limit of 1. So essentially every 1 second it's going to do an AoE around you. It's going to find all valid targets and then it's just going to choose one of them and launch the fireball at it. Next up, I wanted to demonstrate Blizzard Aura. Essentially, Blizzard Aura is just a standard AoE that apparently is ignoring my spell effects mixer channel, so that kind of will need to be fixed. Anyway, what Blizzard Aura is doing is it's basically just doing an AoE effect that's not a projectile and just directly applying the status effect freeze to the targets that it hits. So let's just turn that off here. Is there anything else that I wanted to demonstrate? Right, Healing Circle and Meteor. These are ground targeted abilities. A ground targeted ability will put a projector on the ground, and then basically, once again, it's just casting an AoE. So anything friendly inside of this particular AoE radius is going to be healed while this thing is in action. So you can see if I go and I stick it over underneath these mice here, then I'll start healing the mice as well. They'll be taking healing as well as me. And I'm just going to life tether these goblins down here for a sec. Perfect. So let's just go find, I think that was almost the last category of ability here. Yeah, we've got directionals, we've got AoEs, we've got straight up AoEs. I can do a fireball AoE here. You'll see that it's just going to hit all the targets in range. And then this is standard stuff. We've got, you know, basically a status effect that's a dot that's connected to a prefab. Nothing really that you haven't seen before. And let's actually go jump into the editor now. Unity should be loaded in the background now, and we'll see just how those effects were working here. So the first one was the Blizzard Aura, and Blizzard Aura actually had kind of a cool thing happening that I sort of skimmed over there. When we do the Blizzard Aura AoE, we're going to hit them with the Blizzard Movement Effect status effect. But if we look at this status effect, we see something special on it. We see an effect material right here, and that effect material is this ice material. So what it's going to do is very similar to the mouse over hover. It's going to change every material on the character, all of the mesh renders and skin mesh renders, etc., to this ice material, and that's why he got that sort of freeze effect. As well, it's going to spawn this ice spikes prefab at his feet, and then do this like ice sound effect hit thing. It's also got a stat buff type of movement speed and a stat amount of 0 and a stat multiplier of 0. What that means is essentially it will take his current movement speed stat and multiply it by 0, resulting in him being completely unable to move. And then we've also got this other thing here which disables the animator, because basically like we don't want him spinning around or even continuing like his in combat idle animation, because technically he's frozen in a block of ice. We don't want him moving, pretty much. The other effect was the Healing Circle, was the one that I showed, and If we look at this particular healing ability, it's got another special tick box here called require ground target, and then this ground targeting color right here. So we've got like this sort of white ground targeting, cast targeting projector, and we can just tint it whatever color we want with this ground target color here. The ground target, basically, when you click your mouse, it'll actually take that point on the ground and use that as the center point for whatever additional effects it's going to cast. Also, you'll notice, you probably noticed that when my guy does some casts, occasionally stuff appears on the ground under him. So during the casting time, you can have an ability casting prefab. So I'm just having, like, for example, with this one, those ground green wisps appearing at 0.1 Y position relative to the character, so long as this cast basically is in progress. And I already explained, yeah, the casting animation that it's appearing. So when the ground target hits that, or basically casts its next effect, this AoE circle here, we have the prefab spawn location as point, and that means basically that whatever the point on the ground was that the ground target passed into us, because it's going to pass that point in the same way we pass in like those healing amounts and stuff in order to be able to do further processing on things that happened in previous abilities in the chain. Then it's going to do that nature's embrace tick outwards from this particular point, with a radius of 2, right? Because this healing circle is super, super small. You literally do have to be within like 2 meters of the center of it in order to actually receive that nature's embrace tick, which is a healing effect with a base amount of 5, multiplied by your spell power, which will then put a healing circle burst effect, which is that sort of green burst thing that you might have seen coming out of guys I was healing on the target, which is of course the valid target of the effect, which must be alive and friendly. So that was a probably pretty long and lengthy explanation of how all of these effects and effect abilities, and everything else are working together. Let me just make sure we've gone through and covered pretty much everything here. Factions, dialogue, currencies, animation, abilities, effects. Yeah, it looks like we've covered basically all of the scriptable effect, or scriptable object content that I wanted to cover for this particular live stream. So thanks for joining in, and if you'd like to see more videos like this in the future, then go ahead and subscribe to the Cohesion YouTube channel right there. And if you'd like to see different types of videos, then just leave a comment in the comments below and let me know what type of content you would like to see in the future. Thanks for joining, and I hope to see you soon.